I had no idea that was going to happen.
What's going on, everyone? This is the latest edition of Pro Wrestling Then and Now, and the second edition of Pro Wrestling Then and Now here on the PW Torch YouTube page. I am your host, Frank Pettiani, and today we're going to be discussing the first two Saturday night's main event shows that took place in 1985, and doing that with me is my good friend and fellow Mets fan, David Wolf. He's been on the show with me. You were with me earlier this year, and I think it was Spring Stampede 1994 that we did. So welcome back, David. Looking forward to doing the show with you today.
I am too. How's it going, Frank?
Excellent. So we're going way back. You know, this is not the first time, David, that you and I have been this far back in reviewing WWF wrestling. We did the Wrestling Classic last year. In fact, it was around this time, so we're pretty much around the same time here as we review these first two events. You know, I just want to kind of set the stage before we get into it. You know, Saturday night's main event, you know, what this show meant to us as viewers. You know, you go back to 1985, there's no Raw, there's no SmackDown, there's no monthly pay-per-view. In fact, you know, there's only WrestleMania, you know, and this is the first year of WrestleMania, so we're really not in the pay-per-view cycle yet. So, you know, just kind of talk about Saturday night's main event and what it meant to us as viewers back in 1985.
As you know, the syndicated shows were filled with squash matches, so you didn't really get competitive matches. And Saturday night's main event would air in the slot of Saturday Night Live pretty much once every 6 weeks, but you didn't quite know when. So my childhood was revolved around wrestling for a long time.
Sure.
And, you know, my mother would go, when she'd go shopping, she'd bring home the TV guide.
Oh, yeah.
So the first thing I would do would go this, because if there was going to be a Saturday night's main event, there was an ad in the TV guide on the Saturday page. I would go look to see if we had an SNME coming up. Yes. It was the center of my universe. In fact, the worst punishment I received as a child was when I got into a fight with my sister, and there was a Saturday night's main event on that night, and my punishment was you don't get to watch it.
Oh,
it was the Hogan Orndorff cage match.
Oh no!
And then my sister felt so bad, she was watching it, and I sat at the top of the stairs, and she came and let me know what was going on, and I did not get to watch it until I hung out with my friend a day later, a few days later. But that was absolute. I remember that to this day. That was the worst punishment I had ever received.
Yeah, I got in trouble once. I think I don't remember if I wasn't allowed to tape it or I just wasn't allowed to watch it, or maybe I was allowed to tape it, but I wasn't allowed to watch it for a few days. I don't know, but there was certainly punishment and Saturday night's main event went hand in hand at one point. You know, I mean, you and I are the same age, so this was in our teenage years.
Early teen years, and it was on so late for me. Like, you know, I did not typically stay up that late.
Right. Oh no.
By the time I was 13,
I had the capability of staying up that late. I could generally stay up. Even now, I could stay up till about 1 o'clock. Well, although I do find myself like conking out, you know, around like 10:30, 11 o'clock. But you know, that's adult time. I mean, you know, the kids go to bed. You know, that's a few hours of like, you know, okay, I can watch whatever I want. I can, you know, not have to worry about cleaning up somebody's mess or something. But yeah, it's you know, and to your point too, and I think this is important to talk about with Saturday night's main event. You know, the squash matches on the syndicated show. I wasn't a tape trader. I think you were, maybe later. Did you get into that?
I did. I was precocious, and so at first I didn't have anything to trade. So like what people would do is if you gave them 2 tapes, they would send you one back.
Yeah.
So I started trading as soon as I discovered the Wrestling Observer newsletter, and it had the readers pages at the time, and so I started reading that when I was 13, and then I wrote people who were, you know, advertising these tapes that sounded, they were great, and So I was
Yeah.
probably 15 when I started doing that. And,
Well,
I
the thing, like,
and all that.
and I'm going to sound like an adult yelling at clouds talking about the kids today, but you know, today you have a plethora of wrestling. I mean, it's at your fingertips. It's on every week. You know, it wasn't like that back in the day. If you weren't a tape trader, you got squash matches, like you said earlier on, and Saturday night's main event was, your show. It was Raw before Raw was Raw. 8 years before Raw went on the air. It was your opportunity to see, if you weren't going to the house shows, right? Because that was the formula back then. You watch the syndicated programming, and the idea was to get you to go to your local arena. In my case, Nassau Coliseum. In your case, I would assume the Meadowlands, right? Living in Germany.
Well, I think they kind of promoted MSG, Meadowlands,
Yeah,
and
MSG
Nassau
too, yeah.
to the whole
Yeah.
area. And what was
Sure.
funny, because MSG would air on the MSG network. So those were the biggest cards. But if I was going to go to a card, I wanted to go to the one that I wouldn't be able to see on television. So I was more
Sure.
excited to go to the Meadowlands. We never
Sure.
went to the Nassau Coliseum. That was
Sure. Oh yeah, and I should clarify. I mean, that was closer to me. The Nassau Coliseum is
on Long Island.
excuse me, is closer to me. But Madison Square, believe it or not, logistically, it's actually easier to get to Madison Square Garden. It's a train ride.
I do believe it.
And across, the train ride up the stairs and go watch a show. I mean, it's so logistically, it's easier to get to and from that than it is the, as we would say sometimes, the Nassau Mausoleum. Nassau Coliseum had many nicknames throughout the year. David, before we go any further, I want to give a shout to everybody in the chat. Go ahead and leave comments and chat with us. We'll put them on the air. Happy to have you, and just happy that this show is on YouTube. Happy to have an audience.
It opens it up.
What's that?
It opens it up.
Absolutely, 100%,
100%.
That's what I wanted. I want the interaction. I want your comments. So if you're out there, please talk to us. Say whatever it is you got to say. Let's. And of course, this show will be available. If you're not on YouTube, it will be available, as it has been for the last 4 years, on the PW Torch VIP network. In fact, I think yesterday was the 4-year anniversary of the show. I remember Greg Parks joining me to give him a shout, joining me for the first program. And there we go. There is a comment. I just want to bring it up here. Kevin Toms, hey guys, love listening to the podcast. Kevin, pleasure. Hope you enjoy the show. Drop some comments here. I did not. I had the wrong. I'm getting used to this YouTube thing, everybody. So bear with me. It's one of those things. I'm one of those people that I fumble, stumble, and then eventually when I get it, I'm an expert. So
Wade called you out after the first time you did it. I'm sure you heard.
Oh no, he didn't. Oh no, he did.
Yeah, he did on his post show. He said it felt like someone had come into his home and messed up everything.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Great. I didn't catch that.
I guess you left the screen a different color.
Yeah. Like I said, I'm still. Well, we weren't live for the first 40 minutes of the show, so I had to figure out how to go live.
I figured you'd heard that. You didn't hear him call you out.
No, I didn't. I
thought you would hear it. I would have told you in the past.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have brought it up for the first time right now. He wasn't really upset.
Yeah, no. I can't picture Wade. I'm sure
he's like, what's going on here?
Yeah, this was on a post show, you said?
I think it was a post show.
Okay.
Sure
okay. I have to. You know what? I might have just.
It was the day after you had done it.
Got it. Yeah. You know what? I might have just listened to it and missed it. But anyway, give a shout to my buddy Justin, who's been on this show before. Caught Saturday night's main event once as a kid, stayed up every Saturday afterwards for like a year, hoping to catch it again. Yeah, that's what it was, and never occurred to me to check the TV guide. I would get we would get Newsday, the local paper here in Long Island, and there would be like a TV guide.
I remember
that. Not TV guide itself, but it would be Newsday's version of it. And I would, grab it Sunday morning, flip through it, and oh man, no Saturday night's main event this week. So, whatever. But
This
my
is
buddy
my
Mike
life as a
Chacon
child.
giving him a shout. TV Guide was checked religiously for the Saturday night's main event. 11:30 was insane though as a kid. Yeah, that's
It really was.
that's the truth. All right. So, real quick, I'm sure everybody listening to this show is familiar with Saturday night's main event itself, but just to kind of lay out the history. So, it started in 1985. Dick Ebersol liked the success of the brawl to end it all and the war to settle the score on MTV. So, we thought he would leverage that. The show would air in time slots where Saturday Night Live was not airing, where it was a rerun. So that's where you would get the show. It didn't really have a pattern at first. Like the first one was in May, and then the next one was in October. Then another one was 4 weeks later, and I think they did another one in December. And then it kind of settled in. It was kind of seasonal. So basically, the change in seasons, would kind of be where you would view it. It was on NBC until 1991, until they lost the contract. If you read Wikipedia, it says because of ratings, but I don't think it's a secret that the Sergeant Slaughter Iraqi sympathizer angle was a big culprit behind that. And so the show went on to Fox a year later. In fact,
At least that one paid off at the gate, though. With that
what's that?
WrestleMania. At least that Slaughter angle paid off at the gate with that huge WrestleMania.
Oh yeah.
Oh wait, that didn't happen. I'm sorry.
Right. Yeah, the one that moved to what was it, the LA Sports Arena?
Well, they had security concerns.
Right. Sure. Okay, Bruce. Yeah. Right. Didn't have anything to do with ticket sales.
The ticket sales were great. Listen, I was just speaking to Tony about the ticket sales going on in Texas. Come on, $1 million gate.
Yeah.
The ticket sales for that WrestleMania were fantastic. Unfortunately, we had some security concerns. It was, it ended up still being a very big success, though.
Yeah, for sure. Kevin says, by the time I got into wrestling, I never saw a Saturday night's main event. It's interesting. If you go back, if you started watching, and I'm not sure when Kevin started watching, but if you started watching like in the 90s and later, it might be hard to appreciate it. But, if you know where wrestling was at that point and you watch, you can kind of appreciate its place, like I can't, and this is just something I'm thinking of right now. This is not something I prepared, but what would be a comp right now to Saturday night's main event? He says he started watching in 96. What would be a comp?
I don't think there really is an analog at this point, because once you have the competitive matches taking place,
on
both Raw and Nitro every week,
it
sort of becomes obsolete. So even when they're bringing it back now, it's, it's sort of like a B-level pay-per-view, at least
right.
The first one, and that's
like,
the way
would you say the sort of B pay-per-views would be a comp, or even like AEW Collision? Like, would that be? I know it's not WWE.
I can't compare it to Corrosion. I'm sorry.
Corrosion
or Rampage.
But the point, putting feelings aside about AEW, I mean, there are, like if you look at a Collision, you do get maybe one or two matches that fit in current AEW canon. And then you get some of those squash matches where like we're going to talk about Jay White, Junkyard Dog against Pete Doherty. Like nobody in the building thought Pete Doherty was going to win. And you have a lot of those matches on Collision where who's, what I mean? Like, who's going to win.
Yeah.
So that would probably be my comp right now. I wouldn't say a pay-per-view, because at least the pay-per-views now, or the PLEs, I should say, in WWE's case, they try to make them all feel important. And not that Saturday night's main event wasn't important, but, like in the second one that we're going to, the Dream Team against Tony Garea and Lanny Poffo, like you wouldn't see a match like that on a PLE. You know what I'm getting at? Does that make sense?
Absolutely, because Saturday night's main event would not really pay off anything.
Right.
It would either, we'll get into it later on, but it usually, and this formula wasn't established early on, but it would recycle matches that had already run through the arenas, or if you had a match that hadn't really run its course, it was probably to set up an angle, which would
Sure.
lead to a feud. And then you had at some point starting in 1988, you'd have the once a year Friday night live primetime main event that
Friday night main event.
Mania.
Sure.
So I think it just had a different place at the time. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know if we have an analog for it because wrestling's changed so much over the decades.
It's changed a lot, and it's not going to be apples to apples. It's certainly going to be different. But I just figured, Collision is maybe the closest.
Yeah.
That you and again, because you have so much wrestling, because you have Raw, because you have SmackDown, and for AEW you have, it's going to be Dynamite, Collision moving forward. You have your major storylines playing out, week in and week out. You don't have, you go to 1986, right? The feud between Hulk Hogan and Paul Orndorff. If you weren't going to the house shows, you really weren't seeing the payoff, but you did see the payoff in the steel cage match, later on that year. To your point about not really recycling a match, but ultimately paying off a match, ultimately paying off a feud. Years later, I think you would see like Randy Savage fought DiBiase after Savage won the title. It might have been a couple of months after WrestleMania. Ultimate Warrior would wrestle DiBiase. You know what I mean? Like stuff that would take place on the house show that you would not normally getting on television would pay off on Saturday night's main event. The Friday, ironically, you brought up the Friday stuff. The Friday stuff was there to set up, right? Because you think about it.
Yeah. It was set up WrestleMania.
The 88 show set up WrestleMania when Hulk dropped the title, and then the 89 show,
Savage, the Mega Powers exploded.
That set up Savage, one of the greatest betrayals this side of Hogan and Orndorff.
I think that was the best storyline until Bloodline, Sami Zayn.
That's not unfair.
Hogan Savage.
That's not an unfair statement. It really isn't. The Hogan Savage.
The year long breakup.
Sure.
Of Mega Powers.
And that's
Hogan
probably
after Elizabeth. He really did.
Yeah, and that's,
I don't blame Randy Savage or anyone who ever turned on Hulk Hogan. And we could even talk about it in the first Saturday night's main event, how Hulk Hogan is such a heel in his match against Bob Orton, and Bob Orton's a total babyface.
Okay. There was another point I was going to make. Kevin asks, even over Rock and Austin, not to dig too much into that, but Rock and Austin was scattered over several years. It's not like they had this continuous thing, if you think about it. They did wrestle at 3 WrestleManias, no question about it. So, Rock and Austin were, I think it was just a matter of the two biggest stars, going at it at different points in their time period.
Rock and Austin had a great feud, but the storyline itself,
right?
To me, the Mega Powers breaking up, they had little hints throughout. If you watch SummerSlam, Hogan grabs Elizabeth's ass
pretty much.
And then Savage is giving him dirty looks. He does that after Survivor Series too. So to me, it was just told very subtly in a way. And Rock and Austin, that's one of the great feuds of all time, maybe the best feud of all time. But I think the way the storyline was told was, in my estimation, the best storyline in wrestling that I'd ever seen until last year or 2 years ago when they did the Bloodline and Sami Zayn, which I just thought was.
Well, you can even go back. There was a Saturday night's main event that Savage wrestled Honky for the Intercontinental title. This is when Savage was a fresh babyface, and I think there was a post-match attack. And
that was the official babyface turn.
That was the turn. Well, he was technically a babyface, or because they were acknowledging him as the former Intercontinental Champion, and he was getting cheered. He was always kind of getting cheered. But the point is, Elizabeth went and got Hogan, and that's when he and Hogan shook hands. So I would argue that their storyline went back to 87. I mean, so we're talking about over
Oh yeah.
nearly 2 years. So in comparison to Rock and Austin, it's two completely different. It's two completely different stories. And Rock and Austin, their story had different iterations. Like it was the corporate Rock who finally got taken down by Austin. The second match was, babyface Rock getting taken down by now, heel Austin, right? And then the third one is heel Rock. You know what I mean? So it's like it's different. They're in different places.
You just had the two biggest stars,
right?
Two of the three biggest stars in this organization's history there at the same time.
Right.
They were just going to
different
consistently face off with each other. But I don't know if the storyline presented itself in, as coherent a fashion as your point. You have different iterations, and they're always and their matches. I mean, WrestleMania 17. I still, it's probably top WrestleMania. It's may pick it as the number one WrestleMania of all time. Still, I'd have to think about it. And that match is one of my favorites of all time. Rock Austin from Mania 17. And I thought that WrestleMania 19 was a really great match.
I actually loved WrestleMania 19. I actually might even love that match better. But the happenings in 17, there was a lot more. It was a
17,
lot more.
17 was the peak. 17 was the peak of the industry, probably.
Yep. Justin, televised wrestling back then was also Stars versus Jobbers. Saturday night's main event was most people's opportunity to see Stars versus Stars without having to tape trick. Yeah, I mean that's really the key to Saturday night's main event. I was a guy. I took my allowance, right, or my that was before paper routes.
Get magazines.
I took my allowance. I went down to the video store. There was a video store down
rent the videos.
Hill Road. Okay. That's where I'd get my tapes, or I'd go down to the library, or, if we went shopping at the mall, Mom, Dad, can we go to remember Sam Goody, right? Remember that? And I see a rest. Do you mind if I get the, whether it was like
all the same things,
or, whatever it was. That
it was a different world.
Yeah. And that's what it was. And it's funny. I'll give a shout to my Uncle Billy. Every time I would stay at the house. They lived in Brooklyn at the time. My mother and father, my father would go on like business trips with his company. So I would stay at my uncle's house. And it seemed like every time I stayed with them, Saturday night's main event was on. So I'd be like, Uncle Bill, you got to record Saturday night's main event. All right. He watched wrestling too, so it didn't matter to him. I watched several Saturday night's main event shows in Brooklyn, New York, as opposed to my home in Long Island. Real quick, before we get to the specific shows, David, the show came back in 2006 and lasted 5 episodes. They were scattered up until July 2008. I barely remember them, quite frankly. I might not have even watched all of them. And for me, when it came back, it just felt like a show that was folded into current canon into WWE at the time. And that's not the point of Saturday night's main event. Like, it was a special and unique show that just, to Justin's point about Stars versus Jobbers, we were long past that. We're monthly pay-per-views, Raw and SmackDown every week. You're getting Stars versus Stars. So you're just basically adding another show. And to me, that's why it didn't work. Do you have opinions about the reboot? How much did you watch of the reboot, if any? And what was your thought on it?
I don't have very specific memories of the reboot. I don't know how many I watched. After Eddie died, I stopped watching wrestling for a period.
Okay.
And it was actually right before Benoit murdered.
Yeah, we're not too far
so, and really, I didn't really come back until when Brock returned from MMA. I started watching, and then what really drew me in was Bryan Daniel Bryan, everything going on with him. And, I got way back into it at the time. But no, I agree with your analysis. I mean, the whole thing with Saturday's main event at that point is it can't just be, matches, competitive matches, because We get that on Raw, we get that on SmackDown, which is why it's coming it's coming back now. And I think they've succeeded in the way they're promoting this, at least this first episode, because they're treating it differently. It's not being treated as a Raw or a SmackDown. It's being treated as essentially a pay-per-view, not a big pay-per-view, but a pay-per-view. And you've got matches that have been built up, feuds that have been built, and I think they've done a really good job. So it's standing out. When they brought it back in 2006, it didn't stand out. They didn't have any reason to make it stand out. Well, they might have, but it was a different company. And I think, just one more point, and I don't know if you mentioned it, but Saturday Night's Main Event was actually in '85 was the return of wrestling after 30 years to network television, because wrestling when TV first began, just this sort of history, wrestling was a very, very big, perhaps the biggest thing on television at the time. Gorgeous George was one of the biggest stars in the country, bigger than Hulk Hogan. And then in 1955, that was it. I mean, it was oversaturation, and then it was Dumont Network. It was gone, and it didn't come back for 30 years. So that was a pretty big thing for wrestling to be back on network television in '85 after 3 decades.
Kevin's point, by the time it came back in 2006, it was just too much wrestling at that point. It was watered down. I think that's fair. I think that's a fair starting point. And, to kind of add that to what we're talking about, the fact that it didn't feel special, it didn't feel unique. It was just like, why am I watching this? As opposed to what they're doing today, like you just mentioned, they're making it feel like a big deal. They're making it feel special. They're hyping the matches. You want to see the first, women's U.S. title or U.S. champion crown. You want to see what's going to happen with Cody and Kevin. You want to see, the title match. You want to see these things play out. So it is making it feel different. And now I heard a little birdie told me, now I don't know if it's true or not. We'll see. But supposedly Triple H does not want any Titantrons. He doesn't want any pyro. He wants nothing. He wants it to feel like an authentic 80s setting.
Wow. It would be perfect for you and me.
That'd be great. I'm curious.
Our age cohort.
I'm curious to see how it's gonna play out. Because my understanding is that Obsession is going to be played. Which, if that's the case, that's the original. That's Saturday Night's Main Event. Like when I hear that song, that's Saturday Night's Main Event. The
music is so important and integral that it's really loses so much as we watch these things on Peacock.
Yeah.
And I wanted to bring it up. I think they may have, they've been using the generic music forever. Did they actually change the generic music to other generic music
for Saturday Night for the show? You mean?
Yeah, because I've watched these episodes in the past, and I feel like the generic music that I was hearing here may have been new generic music replacing previous generic.
Yeah, I don't know the story because the theme that opened the first the shows that we're going to review today was actually the theme from '88 and on. And I'm like, where's Obsession? And if Obsession's going to be there or if Obsession's going to be used this week, it might just be a thing with Peacock and NBC Universal. I don't know all the logistics and the parameters because I know there's copyright.
Well, it's first time airing versus repeated airings.
What's that?
It's a bit different while they're airing it, just one time on television for a first time airing versus, streaming forever.
Yeah.
I don't know the intricacies of the law there. So
yeah,
there are differences as far as money. Too bad Tony Khan doesn't own this company, or we'd have all.
All right, so just a couple of other things here. So after 2008, the Saturday Night's Main Event moniker, if you will, would be used for house shows on certain Saturday Night's Main Events. Yeah. And this is now the first time that we're actually getting a show. We'll give Azan a shout here. I believe it should always be live instead of taped back in 06 in the 80s. It was hard. It was hard to do a live show.
especially if it's 11:30 to 1
11:30. Right. And so it was going to be difficult. I don't know that, they wanted to air a live program on NBC at 8:00 on a Saturday night. I mean, they would do it for the main event shows, but I didn't think those were taped. The main
No,
event.
they weren't.
They were live. Okay.
They were live.
I didn't get a chance to. I wasn't even planning to talk about that. I'm talking about that off the cuff. But you're saying the main event shows, the Friday
night main events were live.
Those were live. Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, at that point, though, we're talking 88. So there's a few years of success already. So, that tells me they were willing to take that chance and air those shows live. But yeah, on at 11:30 at night, it's hard to do a live show. And rumors of Jimmy Hart going to be there. Yeah, I've heard that too with Jimmy Hart.
Ageless wonder, Jimmy Hart.
Good old Jimmy. Yep.
It's got to be 80 what at this point?
So, yeah.
He's
something.
He was old when he started out in the 70s. I'm not even joking.
Yeah. That's for sure. All right, let's get to these shows, David. So we got 2 episodes that we're reviewing today. The first one was taped on May 10th of 1985. It aired one night later. This was at the Nassau County Coliseum in Uniondale, New York.
Look at that.
Yeah, look at that.
What
20 minutes. 20 minutes down the road, the home of the New York Islanders at the time. And according to Wikipedia, 8,300 in attendance and did an 8.8 rating on NBC. So not too shabby. Your announcers, not too shabby at all. It's Vince McMahon and Jesse the Body Ventura. Your interviewer is Gene Okerlund. Your ring announcer is Howard Finkel. So they were not doing the music in conjunction with the promos. That wouldn't happen for a few episodes. And it was I looked it up on the Wikipedia page. It was the traveling music from the movie American Flyers. Did you ever know that?
I had no idea.
So go on whatever music platform, look up traveling music and from American Flyers, and like the first 10 seconds is the promo music. It's actually pretty cool. So
wow.
What I've been doing on my phone, I've been playing that, and then I have Obsession queued up, and then I hit Obsession like so
the authentic experience.
I've been driving my kids crazy with that. And they're familiar with Obsession, by the way. God bless them. 12 and 11 years old. They know Obsession. So Cyndi Lauper tells Wendy Richter, whatever happens, don't let her pull your hair. All right. And
I think Cyndi Lauper was the first one we see too, right? She's the first person. The first person we see is Cyndi Lauper, right?
Isn't that crazy?
I mean, this was still very much Vince trying to, I would assume, because Cyndi Lauper's there and she's the first you see. You don't see the wrestler. Well, she's with Wendy Richter, but it's not Hulk Hogan. And then Mr. T is still there. So, they wanted to get their celebrity guns out for the network. I'm sure.
Yeah.
From there, right. That was I would guess was the idea, because especially since by the time October rolls around, this rock and wrestling thing has really died down big time.
But they took advantage of it at the time, and it was smart.
Oh, yeah.
It was smart to do that. So yeah, you see Cyndi Lauper, then you get Hulk Hogan and Mr. T saying that, or Mr. T says he's going to pity the fool Roddy Piper if he gets involved in the match between Hogan and Orton. And then you get, I think they cut to the theme after that, which was the theme used in '88. We kind of touched on that. Technically, they were using Obsession at the time, so I don't know if it was a copyright thing, or maybe when it was recorded. I don't know. You get them.
Oh, yeah, they just don't want to spend the money on it.
Yeah. I don't know the logistics of that, because it's on the Peacock platform, so maybe they have to be the ones to pay for it. I don't know. You get Vince and Jesse hyping up the title matches and the 6-man tag. You then get Gene Okerlund's talking to Barry Windham, Mike Rotunda, and Ricky Steamboat, Captain Lou. I hadn't heard this term in years. Lou says if Freddie Blassie gets involved, he's going to cream him. I haven't heard the term cream somebody since like grammar school.
I know. It just makes me laugh.
But that's when I was in. Well, that's
that's
that's about the
kinda
time I was
creamy.
actually in junior high school at the time. So
Oh my, yeah.
as you were,
That was definitely the lingo from the '80s, though.
yeah, yeah.
Yep.
And Barry Windham wishes it was a tag title match. I swear to God, sometimes I think Bray and Bo are actually Barry's kids because Bray and Bo, God rest Bray's soul, by the way, they sound like Barry and they look like Barry.
Yeah,
I mean,
they
it is
are
his
related.
uncle.
Yeah,
They are his uncles. So,
yeah, exactly.
so it's not, it's not too far off. Steamboat and Rotunda actually say nothing. I figured Ricky Steamboat would say something, but
He wasn't exactly a killer promo either.
no, it wasn't a killer promo.
All three of those guys.
Azan, Bob Orton's only major match in the Fed. I know they would run the match back, not really run it back, so to speak, but on Superstars in 1987.
How about, would you consider Bob Orton? He boxed Mr. T on Saturday Night's Main Event to set up the WrestleMania 2 boxing match between Mr. T and Piper. So I would say that's probably a major match if you're in the ring with Mr. T.
Yeah. Probably. Azan says also not the yeah, he wasn't the Dragon yet, so he hadn't really gotten that moniker. And I think
he wasn't breathing fire.
He was not breathing fire. Right? No, and
but bringing his kid to the ring and getting booed.
Who did he work at wrestle? Was that Matt Bourne or was that Tito Sant? No, he did wrestle Matt Bourne.
Yeah, that was actually a pretty good match.
Was a pretty good match. At the
time. Probably the best match at WrestleMania 1.
You know him as Doink the Clown, Matt Bourne. So Doink the Clown at the first WrestleMania, kids. How about that? Tell your children. We got a looks like a is this a super chat? I can't tell. Again, I'm yes, it is a super chat. How influential was Dick Ebersol in Saturday Night's Main Event? I mean, I would say very influential, right? Because he again, he saw the success of what had been taking place on those MTV programs. But as far as like the writing and the storylines, I mean, would you say he was influential in that, or he was just the main driver to get the program onto the onto the show or onto the network?
I mean, I don't think there would have been a Saturday Night's Main Event without Dick Ebersol.
Yeah.
But I don't think he had any influence on the product itself. Although maybe he did. Maybe he had I don't know that he.
I think
the juvenile humor and everything is so Vince to begin with. I don't know if he needed to be nudged in that direction. Although I mean, I don't know. I can't really remember whether Dick Ebersol wanted the more the less sports oriented way the Saturday Night's Main Event. I mean, because it's very much cartoonish, and you had a lot of complaints because, and you can even see it. I think in the Wrestling Observer, David Meltzer was complaining. Or he was pointing out that a lot of people had complained because you saw the heels and faces together, either on the first or second episode.
Yes.
So it's sort of breaking kayfabe before people were ready to break kayfabe. And I don't know whether Dick Ebersol had any type of influence.
If I'm wrong about this, I think Todd might have spoken about it. And if he didn't, I apologize. But I think.
Just say whatever. We're friends with him, but just say
this is true.
He won't mind. He won't mind if you attribute something to Todd that he didn't actually say. He's not the type of guy who's gonna.
I think he said it might have been like just the way the promos went because it was on network television. I think they wanted him to sound a little. I don't know if it was corny or cheesy, but just. Because of where they were, they wanted the promos to sound a certain way. I think that
these were scripted promos before we really had
scripted before scripted. Yeah.
So maybe that was part of Ebersol too.
Yeah,
especially if you're saying Todd. We'll just blame Todd. That's Todd Martin, folks.
It's all your fault.
Ebersol wanted scripted promos or Transmit event.
Right.
I am not saying that Todd said that. I have no idea what.
We're gonna
I don't know whether
we're gonna get
I
messages,
don't
Brandon, Dave. We're in for it later. We're gonna get it later.
We're gonna know whether Todd listens.
Azan says he helped with the production like a leaf fitting today. Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
That makes a lot of sense. Got a super chat here from CJ. Appreciate that. Are you two big Bailey fans? She is currently my favorite wrestler. I like Bailey. I wouldn't say I'm a big Bailey fan, but I think I appreciate her work. You know what I mean?
I was a bigger Bailey fan. Definitely, I think she was the MVP of the pandemic era.
Yes,
and
I agree.
I loved her work before that. I think since she's come back from the injury, and I don't think she's ever really recovered completely. And that's just from her body of work since that time. I don't think she's the same in the ring, but I love Bailey, and I still think that Bailey Sasha in Brooklyn, it's one of the great matches of that era, women or men's. That was just such a super match.
And it's always going to be hard after a certain amount of time. I'll give a shout to a friend of mine, Kyle Ross, formerly of the Top Rope Nation podcast, talked about the Jake Roberts rule. And I think it was Jake Roberts that said after 6 years, it's hard to be relevant. And that's kind of what happened with Jake. I mean, after a certain amount of time, it's hard to have that same zip. It's hard to have that fastball, if I'm using a baseball analogy. So, like I said, while I do appreciate her work, and I think she's kind of moved into that legacy role now, where she's pretty much bulletproof. She can eat losses and she can help put others over. I think that's where we are with Bailey at this point. Jumping back, I don't want to get too off track. I want to get back to the show. So we mentioned the interview with Wyndham Rotunda and Ricky Steamboat. Of course, we get Nikolai Volkov, who asks everybody to sing the
he just called it Wyndham Rotunda, which
Wyndham. Yeah, I always do that. Okay. Wyndham, yeah. Oh, I see what you did there. Freudian slip.
I thought so. Okay.
Freudian slip. Yeah. God bless you. We miss you, Bray. God bless you. God bless you. All right, now who's singing the Russian national anthem? You or me?
No one wants to hear me sing it, so I'll stand to respect the singing of the Russian national anthem.
Okay, no, I'm not going to do it.
I'll do the Iron Sheik part.
Iran number one.
Russian number one. America,
It's so amazing how that can bring a smile to your face 40 years later. It really
God.
It's so classic. It's so classic.
These cartoon characters are so much fun.
For sure. All right, so the first match is Mike Rotunda and Barry Windham teaming with Ricky Steamboat and taking on the Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov and heel George the Animal Steel. Let's see. Okay. Sorry about that. So quick background here. So Volkov and Sheik had beat Wyndham and Rotunda for the tag titles at WrestleMania, but they would drop them back after this at a championship wrestling taping in June. Steel had worked mostly singles matches throughout his career and was working sporadically at best. You'd have to go back to 1977 if ProFightDB.com is accurate. That's where I get my match history, where he teamed with Baron Mikel Cicluna against Tony Gurria and Larry Zbyszko. So a little bit of history there at an MSG house show. And he did work Backlund a lot, Bob Backlund, during his initial WWF tag team title run. This match, according to Wikipedia, the timing was 6.5 minutes. You've got Wyndham rolling up George Steele for the pin. So the story of the match is Steele is tagged in. He's tagged in and he works a little bit, but then he wants to tag out, and both Sheik and Volkov just jump off the apron and abandon him. So this is, right out of the gate, a big talking point, a big happening as George Steele, for all intents and purposes, turns babyface. He's comforted by Lou Albano. And then we get a post-match where they talk to Sheik and Volkov and Freddie Blassie. He calls him a fruitcake. So real 1980s digs there. And he didn't tag in when he was supposed to. And then Sheik and Steele go at it. I thought the match, for what it was, I thought the crowd was hot for it, and I thought there was enough, for a television 6-man tag. And we got a big happening, and I thought it kind of set the tone for what they wanted Saturday night's main event to be. So, David, your thoughts on this 6-man?
I think it was probably the best match out of the 2 Saturday night's main events that we watched.
Probably.
Yeah. Wyndham and Sheik had some pretty decent action. Look, Steamboat is Steamboat. Setting up the George Steele turn. I don't know if I was too old. George Steele, I was never a big fan of George Animal Steele. I didn't dislike him, but I never really got too into that character. Were you a big George Steele guy?
You know what? I got
Elizabeth, or did you want to see Randy Savage kick his ass? Because I sort of wanted to see Randy Savage get rid of this guy.
My uncle and I got a kick out of him. Like we'd go around doing we would do that more than anything else. Azan pointed.
You had a green tongue, didn't you?
With the green tongue, he was a teacher, so we worked seasonally. Yeah, no, we. I think he was a math teacher or a history.
I know he was a gym. I think he was maybe a football coach. He was a gym instructor in Detroit.
Oh, okay.
But it was seasonally. Yeah, he would disappear for the school year and then come back until he started making so much money. I think during the expansion that he stopped teaching.
Yeah, it was jarring too. Like in later years, to see him do interviews, like, wow, this is the guy that can only say one word and eat turnbuckles and go, But yeah, as far as the match is concerned, I mean, there's not really a lot to the match, and there's really not a lot to any of these matches. That's kind of the Saturday night's main event formula. I kind of look at it as like hit and run. Like they got basically right to the point. They got right to where they wanted to go. With the particular matches, nothing really overstayed its welcome, which is probably why it shouldn't be compared to Collision. So maybe I should retract my, because we get 10 to 15 minute squashes on Collision, right?
These weren't about delivering good matches. That was definitely not the point of Saturday's main event.
I'm glad you said, because by you saying that is the point of Saturday night's main event. It was not there to have great matches. That's not the point. It was there, and Justin brought this up in the chat before, for people who did not tape trade, that were just getting the squashes on television. You're getting the stars versus the stars. So, but you're getting enough of it where you still want more, so you're looking forward to the next show, right?
Oh,
and you also, might have the desire to go down and see the house shows. So
which was also exactly what they had to do back then. I mean, the entire business was so different. They needed to get you to go buy tickets, go to the arena. So,
they didn't have big television deals. You didn't have, Raw.
You didn't even have pay-per-view at this point. This is right after the first WrestleMania, which was a closed circuit event. There may have been 1 or 2 systems that had pay-per-view capabilities, but really, This was still 6 months away from Wrestling Classic.
6 months away from Wrestling Classic, and 2 years. We're 2 years away from the first Survivor Series.
Oh
yeah. So we're well off. We're well away from the multiple pay-per-view format. Obviously,
where you could deliver certain things on Saturday's main event that's not going to hurt your bottom line, and they were just worried that
Right. Okay. The one thing I will say, I did notice on commentary that did you pick up that Vince and Jesse were kind of hinting at the turn, because they said that, how is George Steele going to fare in tag team wrestling? And I kind of felt like there was a little bit of a foreshadow. Did you pick that up?
I did not pick that up. I may have been tuning it out a little bit. I like Jesse. Vince, there's no real chemistry between the two, because there's probably no chemistry between Vince and any commentator. Vince is actually not a terrible commentator, but he doesn't really have chemistry with anyone. It's not like Jesse and Gorilla, or Gorilla and Bobby Heenan.
No, you're talking. That's a whole different. No, that's a whole different. That's a whole different world. That's no. Vince. I thought
Too bad these weren't live because Vince wouldn't have been commentating if these were live.
I thought Vince and Jesse eventually, it was more Jesse giving Vince a hard time. You know what I mean? Come on, McMahon, show some decorum, or, you're being biased, McMahon, like that kind of stuff. I thought they had chemistry there. Vince and Bobby, I never felt like, they made it work, but they didn't have the chemistry that Gorilla and Bobby had, without question.
Vince didn't have chemistry with anyone.
Yeah. All right.
For probably obvious reasons at this point.
Yeah. So that's your first match. We then go to Piper's Pit. So this is basically to discuss what had happened at WrestleMania, where Piper and Orndorff lost to Mr. T. There's all kinds of stuff going on. Piper wants Orndorff to sit down, wants to talk man to man. Orndorff insists that Orton calls him a dunce. Go stand in the corner. And then Orndorff insists that Piper sit down first, saying ladies first. And, all kinds of stuff. Piper calls Orndorff a loser. Orndorff accuses him of hightailing it out of the ring. Piper says he's lost his guts. He took him under his wing. And then this line really got me. Orndorff tells Roddy, "You've been drinking too much of your bath water." Paul Orndorff. He embarrassed him. He embarrassed Ace. He embarrassed everybody in his family. And then he says something. I couldn't understand it, but it set him off. And then basically it leads to Piper goes after him. Orndorff tries to do the pile driver. Orton stops him. Then Mr. T comes out. There's no physicality. And that's the end of Piper's Pit. Any thoughts on that, David?
Roddy Piper was the personality that really drew me into wrestling more than anyone else at this. This is, I should point out, this is slightly before I started watching. By the second Saturday Night's Main Event, I had been a fan. Actually, we'll talk about it for a month. So this is before that point. But, Piper was everything to me. He was a heel. So I was a kid, so I kind of rooted against him, but I liked him.
Yeah.
And so Piper's Pit, that was also like on the syndicated shows, you didn't get competitive matches, but boy, did I look forward to Piper's Pit. Every week. And the only other thing I'd point out here with Paul Orndorff is he's got a pair of short shorts on.
Oh, dude.
It reminded me, there's a scene when Apollo Creed is training Rocky in Rocky 3, and they're running on the beach, and these guys are wearing the shortest shorts you could ever see.
Yeah, you know what? I never made that connection. Nice.
I'm looking at Orndorff, I'm like, he's got the same shorts. I'm like, well, so 1980s.
Yeah, I thought it was weird.
Very metrosexual is all you can really say.
I thought it was really weird get up for a segment. I'm like, no jeans and a t-shirt, nothing. Like,
look at these shorts. You look ridiculous, man.
He obviously goes to the Lanny Poffo school because at the that we'll talk about with the Uncle Elmer reception, he's there shirtless. Like, I'd like to go to a wedding reception shirtless. I don't know if anybody else wants to be there shirtless, but that's another story for another day.
Hogan with his t-shirt tucks or
the t-shirt tucks,
sleeveless tucks, whatever he had on. Hulk Hogan. Oh.
But you know what? Jokes aside, I thought it was effective because it kept the story going. And like you said, Piper's Pit was something you looked forward to on a show with a lot of squash matches. And I thought that
they have a match on the second episode.
They have a match on the second episode, but again, it kept it going and it kept you engaged. And it also went a ways to turn Paul Orndorff babyface, which was happening already.
Another thing here, you got the George Steele turn, and then we're establishing the Paul Orndorff turn because he didn't really officially turn probably until the show.
Yeah,
because he was left hanging in WrestleMania when he got knocked out and left in the ring, and he's like, and he gets up. It's like, it's Mr. T and Hulk Hogan. All my friends are gone.
Azan, going back to our commentary, our commentary that Vince and Pat were good. I've watched old matches with Vince and Pat. I'd have to listen again. I don't remember. I don't remember it being good, but I don't remember it being a bad. Like I don't remember their chemistry. But I do know that they work together. Several times, like at the MSG shows and things like that. You would hear them on commentary. Back to the show here. We did cut to a Hogan interview. A lot of interviews on these shows.
Mm-hmm.
So need to get Piper and Orton out of the WWF, and he wants to dedicate this upcoming match to his mother. And typical Terry says the change in Orndorff has a lot to do with people getting behind him, including his Hulkamaniacs. So nothing to do with his change in ways. Just it's got to do with Hulk Hogan. So Hulky's got to.
Hulk was everything.
Hulk was everything. All right. Your next match, we've kind of talked about it. Hulk Hogan defending the WWF Championship against Cowboy Bob Orton, the father of Randy Orton. So Orton was in the, we kind of touched on this already. Orton was in the corner of Piper and Orndorff at WrestleMania. So this is kind of an offshoot, if you will, of that. Orton accidentally hit Orndorff with the cast when he came off the top rope, and that led to Hogan and Mr. T winning the match. He ends up working Orton again at a Baltimore house show, as well as a tag team match with Big John Studd against Hogan and Orndorff in June. So they do follow up on this. And I mentioned they wouldn't have another one-on-one until a Superstars taping in 1987. This goes a little under 7 minutes. Hogan wins it. So Orton is DQ'd after Hogan hits the leg drop. Piper gets involved. He attacks Hogan. And it's really weird because the referee is not looking at it. He just stops the count. And then a second or two later, he turns around and he calls for the bell. So whatever. 1985, right? And let's see what else I got here. So, you mentioned something before, and I want you to expand on it. A lot of heel tactics by Hulk Hogan, and watching this match, you would think that Orton was the babyface, especially the way he was going after the cast, especially the way he was going after the arm. And Hulk would do that a lot. He exhibited a lot of heel tactics. If
Hogan starts the match by
biting, brother, I like that.
Biting one. Hogan begins the match by biting Orton's forehead.
Yeah.
Jesse calls him out on it, and Vince says, I don't think that's what he's doing. And it was clearly what he was doing.
Right.
And Orton wrestles technically, scientifically. In fact, what I found really interesting here, because especially it's the formula for Hogan matches, I think consistently for years, where Hogan starts off with the advantage, and the heel gains the advantage only by some form of cheating, either by the manager or the heel does something. Here, Orton gains his advantage through technique. Orton doesn't cheat at all. And I also found it interesting that they protected him and he didn't have to do the 1-2-3 pinfall loss here. And I don't know if it was because they were planning to come back to this, because Hogan could have gotten the leg drop and pin, and then they could have done the post-match stuff anyway. But so you have Hogan wrestling essentially as a heel. If you don't know that Hogan's the babyface and you don't know that Orton's the heel and you're just watching, you're seeing this giant guy on all roided up, cheating. And the other guy, coming back through using wrestling moves. And then, again, I think it's pretty interesting, both the formula for this match, which was quite unconventional, especially compared to later Hogan matches. And then just the ending itself. I don't think you ever see that again, too. Hogan, if there's a DQ on a Saturday Night's Main Event, there's some type of angle being set up. And you can say that they had that here, but again, you could have easily gotten the 1-2-3 and then done whatever you're going to do afterwards. And I don't really think you needed to protect Bob Orton, considering where he was slotted. But I don't, they went eventually. I guess maybe they were thinking about the WrestleMania 2 scenario and setting that up. I don't know. But it was a pretty good match, actually, too. I would say for Hogan, because of Bob Orton, I think it was an above average Hogan match for the time. If you go back to the Hogan in Japan, early 80s, he had better matches. But as far as WWF goes, I don't think so. Not a whole lot better than this at that point until Randy Savage came along.
Right.
And Randy Savage against Hogan. They had a Madison Square Garden series. I don't know if you recall it. It was late '85, early '86. Right when Savage wins the Intercontinental belt before their third match, which was a lumberjack match, which was the weakest of them all. But those first two matches, especially the first one, first one's probably November '85. A Hogan Savage match might be the best Hogan match, I think, of that entire run. That first
they
Savage
start a little
match
bit. They start a little bit later in the year. Excuse me. I agree with you on Orton. I agree. He's he's trying to make a comeback via technical means and not necessarily cheating. And watching the match, you would think that Hogan was the heel there, and it didn't have the. I was going to ask you, when did we start really getting the Hulk up series? Because we got it here, but it really wasn't after a finisher. It was just after a heat segment, and then all of a sudden Hogan would start hulking up. Usually it was after a finisher, usually after a heel hit their finisher, he would kick out and start the Hulk up series. And then it would be punch, 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 boot to the face, leg drop, pin. He does boot to the face and then an elbow drop to a near fall. So it really wasn't the Hogan formula. When did that actually start? Maybe a year later?
I think I would say less than that, because I think it was there by the time I started watching, which again, this is May, and I'm watching come September.
Yeah.
Because I feel
Volkov, you kind of see it.
Did he Hulk up in the Volkov match in the second?
He did Hulk up, and we'll talk about it. He hulks up after Volkov body slams him and then goes to a near fall, and then he kicks out, and then he does the Hulk up series, and there you get the finish. There you get the Hogan.
Maybe he's developing it at this point.
Yeah, I think that's what it was, because it wasn't. Typically it's he doesn't go to anything. He doesn't do a pinfall attempt until he hits the leg drop. So I was just.
This is still just a year into their expansion. January '84, and now we're in May '85. I mean, this is very early. It's still really early.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And I think as far as the finish, I think it's more, like you said, to tell the post-match story where, they start cornering Hulk Hogan, where Mr. T gets involved, and then, Piper and Orton take care of him, and then they're cornering Hogan, and then Orndorff gets involved. So
and that's establishing the Orndorff face turn at that
point. Right. They very well could have done a pinfall, but I'm guessing, on television they wanted to, because you got more eyeballs watching that. They wanted to keep him strong because they were doing another match at a house show. I don't know. Maybe that's what they were thinking. But yeah. So, any other thoughts on the? We were about to get the Orton superplex. By the way, I always appreciate a Bob Orton superplex
for sure, especially since no one else was doing it.
Hogan does, Hogan does stop that. Anything else on this match before we move forward?
I don't have anything else on it. Hulk Hogan, what a terrible human being.
Yeah. Well,
and he's probably coked up at this point too, because that was a big thing for him at that time.
He would be his true self in about 11 years when he joins the NWO. So
there you go.
Takes a little while. Jean talks to the fabulous Moolah. She wants Cyndi Lauper banned from ringside due to her involvement at Wrestling Mania, right? Get to that in a second. And as well as the brawl to end it all, she says if she sees Cyndi at ringside, she has a letter from WWF management. I guess I can't really blame Moolah, regardless of what we think of Moolah. And I know Moolah's not everybody's favorite person, but, she did get involved. So I can't say I blame her for wanting her banned. And then Cyndi standing there with her boyfriend. What's his name, Dave?
Well, listen, I didn't mention it earlier, but Cyndi and I were dating at the time. I was a big part of this whole scenario. In fact, if you listen to some of these documentaries, they'll say this is all David Wolf's idea.
That's right.
And yeah, well, unfortunately, it didn't work out with Cindy and me, or with me in WWF, or with me and the Freebirds. But these were very difficult memories for me. That's all I really want to say about my appearance on the first episode of Saturday Night's Main Event, which they didn't really promote me. I don't even think they mentioned my name.
They did not.
They just had me on there, and I was just standing there. Yeah, I looked a lot different. I had a lot more hair, younger.
David, you should have known when she came out with the song "Girls Just Want to Have Fun." You should have known she wasn't in it for the long haul.
And I have to say, I believe that "Girls Just Want to Have Fun" must have been played at some point on this episode, although I have no idea because I watched it on Peacock and it was nowhere to be heard. But yeah. I am certain it had to have been there. Right? Yeah.
I'm certain it was too.
Which is a shame because that's a great song too. I mean, and I'm not just saying that because she's my ex, and I don't, still have holding out hope for.
So we amongst all this joke, we are talking about Cyndi Lauper's real life boyfriend and manager at the time, David Wolf, but it was spelled with 2 F's.
With an E. Was it 2 F's or with an E?
Oh, maybe you're right. I think it was with an E. Yes.
It's funny because I used to get questions about this when I would put out things on the readers page in the Observer. Like at least one person, I don't know if it was more than, but at least one. Are you the David Wolf? And to me, I was like, well, I spell it differently, so I didn't even realize they were referring to this guy. I was like, who does he think I am? Then I realized later on, I was like, oh, he thought I was a Cyndi Lauper's boyfriend.
Hazan says here in the chat, Wendy treated by WWE bad over the years, no respect, and then
the original screw job, the original Vince screw job.
Yeah, the original screw job. Yeah, I mean, listen, she eventually gets into the Hall of Fame for what the Hall of Fame, means to you, for what it matters. But yeah, she's not really. I mean, I don't know if anybody from that era is really discussed a lot, and I think with the modern audience, I don't know that they're really going to bring up names from 40 years ago that weren't as big as names like Hulk Hogan and on. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
I wonder if
they weren't. I'll say this:
they were promoting her as the equivalent.
If I may, on Azan's point, like in the 90s when women's wrestling came back, I don't remember Wendy Richter being brought up a lot. I mean, they brought Moolah back, they brought Mae Young back, but you really didn't hear Wendy's name. I still think they were on bad terms after the original screw job.
Yeah, I think the screw job, and I think Vince probably would have reconciled with her, but she might not have wanted to do with that. But from the company's perspective, I wonder how much she was promoted as sort of the equivalent of Hulk Hogan for a little while.
Yeah.
And she was with Cyndi Lauper, and they thought she was going to be a really big star, and it kind of flopped.
Yeah.
And I wonder just if that just left a bad taste. And I don't want to say, the companies, because who knows exactly, because we don't know everything that was going on behind the scenes. But of course, the screw job itself, that had to have a major impact in the way they would refer to her in the future, especially before they reconciled. When was she inducted to the Hall of
Fame? 2015, I think. Let me look it up real quick.
I mean, I don't know if, from 1986 or whenever the screw job happened till that point.
1985.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what kind of relationship, if any, she had with the company.
2010, by the way. 2010, right. She was inducted. Yeah, I didn't know that off the top.
All right, yeah, 25 years where they probably, just didn't have any type of contact with each other.
Just not to assume knowledge. So the original screw job was Vince instructed the referee in a match between Wendy Richter and the Spider Lady, which turned out to be the fabulous Moolah. On a pinfall attempt, Wendy had kicked out, but the referee still counted to 3. Very similar to what would happen 12 years later with the Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels sharpshooter incident there. It depends on who you talk. I don't want to litigate the whole story now, but basically Vince said that she wouldn't sign a new contract. Wendy and him had gone back and forth on, creative. I don't know though. I mean, like if she refused to lose the title.
No, I don't think she refused to. No.
What was the story?
Yeah. I think the story was consistent. I think Vince wanted her to sign a new contract before she went out.
Yeah.
And she said, I want my lawyer to review it. And then she went out there and he sent out Moolah to take the belt. That's it.
Yeah.
And she didn't. Then I think she left. She, meaning Richter, I think she just left the arena. It was MSG. I watched that live on MSG Network.
She left. And, she never spoke to Moolah again.
It's funny because this is still early in my fandom, and this is actually before I had discovered the Observer. So I didn't. There seems something seems strange, of course, but you never know with wrestling. It's like, wow, Wendy Richter really seems upset here.
Well, if the and again, not to litigate the screw jobs, but I mean, if the Montreal deal, if you compare it to Montreal, I had to get the title off of Brett. No, you didn't. Like he wasn't going to show up on Nitro with the title. You had a month. You had plenty of other options. So, I tend to I tend to side with the wrestlers on these types of stories. So,
although I would also say one difference, and not to relitigate these either of these incidents, but Brett had creative control in his contract, which I'm sure Wendy Richter did not. So,
right.
Wendy would not have an option to say, you know what, Vince, I don't want to drop this title. I mean,
Yeah, I'd love to dig into the
Brett had that power, which is which complicates complicates the legal issue and any moral issues.
Yeah,
I mean the whole thing is, especially speaking about it now, it's like 1997, Bret Hart didn't want to lose, and you think about because how many current fans weren't even born then, and to hear anything like that, it must strike them as this is so odd. Because, why would anyone care? But back then it mattered. It's so funny because in 1997 it probably mattered a lot less than it did 15, 20 years earlier, but it still mattered to Bret Hart. Bret Hart always took himself and wrestling probably too seriously, though. That's my opinion. He took himself too seriously. I think that's a lot of people's opinions.
Let's see here. Nick, I hope I'm pronouncing it. Teodoro, I hope I pronounced that correctly. Any news on Alexa Bliss return date? Seems like the storyline with the Wyatts and Final Testament is going in that direction with Ellering's return. Not sure. I know she's been rumored.
I don't have an exact memory. I feel like I read in the Observer that she's ready to come back. That I might not be. That might be wrong.
My buddy Justin, per Cornette, Vince was afraid of Eric Bischoff mentioning on Nitro that the WWF champion was on his way to WCW. Yeah, I mean I've heard that story, and it makes a lot of sense, but I don't know. It's again, he had a month, and it wasn't. I don't know. I don't know if Bischoff was actually going to do that. I don't know what I believe. I talked about that a couple of years ago on this show, actually, when we did Survivor Series 97. And, of course, Vince would come up with that. That makes a ton of sense. Right. But anyway, let's get back to this match. So it's Wendy Richter defending the women's championship against the fabulous Moolah. Cindy, in an interview, said she's not getting banned because she's Wendy's manager. She's going to stick by her girl. And then she questioned, what happened at Wrestling Mania? And talking about when Moolah was, she said that Moolah was choking her, and her and Leilani, not Leilani, Leilani were double teaming Wendy. She says that Moolah always interferes, and it's why Leilani won the title at the war to settle the score. She doesn't say that, but they show the video. Anyway, this match, it goes about 4 minutes. Cindy is banned from ringside. Finkel announces it after everybody comes to the ring. Wendy wins it with a small package as Cindy is looking on. You know what? It's not much of a match, but I thought it
It's a
was
horrible
nice.
match.
What's
Terrible.
that?
It's a terrible match.
But you know what?
Terrible.
I think they might have been rushing just because they didn't get a lot of time. But I thought that it was a true baby. And I'm reading a daily DDT review, and I thought they brought up a good point. Moolah playing a terrific heel. Now, that might be a little bit of a stretch, but Rick would just be. But you know what? It was a true. I mean, after watching Hogan and Orton, it's a true babyface heel match. And no, it's not much. It's technically not much of a match at all. But
yes, there is a baby face and there is a heel in this match. Yes, I agree. It was an authentic babyface heel. I don't know if I'd call it a match per se, but it was
no.
There was a babyface and a heel out there. The heel was older than both of us are right now.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean,
she
looks like a grandmother out there. I mean, come on.
Yeah. And listen, they got time. They got time on the first Saturday night's main event. So
they did, and I think I noted this to you in an email when I watched. This was the first Saturday night's main event took place before I became a fan, so I did not watch it on its original airing, but I did watch it later on. Maybe the first time might have been in 2014 when it came to the WWE Network. But when I did watch it, I skipped this match. So this was the first time I had the displeasure of sitting through this terrible match. This is, it was awful. Fabulous Moolah was terrible. She was really, really. I don't know if she was better than
she's
50s.
Way past her prime at this point.
Her prime was when she was out there with Gorgeous George or Buddy Rogers.
Quite a spell ago. All right, let's wrap up.
Mildred Burke.
What's that?
Mildred Burke era.
Yeah. All right, David, let's wrap up the first show. It's the Junkyard Dog against the Duke of Dorchester, Pete Doherty, everybody's favorite jobber from the 80s. He had a record of like 310 or something like that.
Did Gorilla used to call him the Dork of Dukechester?
Maybe.
Yeah, I think he called him the Dork of Dukechester because he'd appear. So before Monday Night Raw, there was Monday Night Wrestling, Primetime Wrestling. They'd have all the squash matches from the arenas. Yeah. And when they'd have the Boston Garden matches, Pete Doherty would always appear. He'd always be a jobber on these matches. And you know what I also remember from those times? In all these arenas now, they all are homogenized. They all look the same. But all these arenas, they had distinct characteristics. They were actually characters themselves. It's like the Boston Garden. What always struck me was the yellow.
Yeah,
like it was so yellow. And Madison Square Garden had this distinct look, and then Toronto had the platform where they'd start fighting. And the
Maple Leaf Garden,
Maple Leaf Gardens, right? Where you had
that's a good nugget to point out. The arenas look distinct.
They had character. They all had their own character. And I looked forward to the different ones, and like that's really gone now. And
I agree.
I don't think it's for the better. But maybe I'm just old, nostalgic. That's why we're discussing these first episodes.
Absolutely. All right. So, real quick before the match, JYD and his mother are interviewed by Gene Okerlund, and he said it was a special time as bringing mother up and wants to.
I loved seeing his mother. I really enjoyed seeing.
Wants to wish all the mothers out there in TV land. Talk about an 80s reference. Happy Mother's Day, including his mother. And his mother is proud, wants him to come home real soon. Not much of a match here, David. 4 minutes. Dog wins this with power slam.
But then he danced with his mom.
And the bell doesn't ring right away, and the crowd isn't sure if he won. But then the referee rings the bell, and he dances with his mother after the match. The one thing I did get a kick out of, like at one point, Dog is lifting Doherty by his hair, like he's doing like pull-ups with his hair. I'm just like, man, that's gotta hurt. My other note here is who's more pale, Pete Doherty or Sheamus?
Sheamus. Sheamus.
What was he, the human jar of mayonnaise, John Cena called him? All right. And to close out the show, there's Cyndi Lauper's Mother's Day surprise. You mentioned this earlier. There's heels and baby faces in the same room. JYD is back there with his mother. Sheik and Volkov, they're upset because their invitations got there late and they couldn't invite their mothers. Freddie Blassie is a woman that's like half his age.
It was his mom.
What's that?
That was his mother.
That was his.
And I mean, there are stories about Fred Blassie in that office that are.
I could imagine. Gene tries to kiss her, but no dice. Lou Albano reads a poem about mothers. Hogan introduces his mother. Says it's a great party except for Volkov and Blassie being there. And then the big thing is Cyndi Lauper is there with a mother and Wendy Richter. Moolah comes out. She's uninvited. Says, how can you have a party without her? Gets into a whole thing with Cindy's mother. Make a long story short, Cyndi shoves Moolah into the cake, and Gene gets a handful of cake as well. Cyndi Lauper's Mother's Day surprise. I'm sure Vince looked at this. Hopefully this doesn't get struck and said, man, this is such good shit.
Yeah, it's such good shit. You had to have someone end up in the cake in the next episode too.
That's right. That's right. Setting the tone for
hey, just that is actually what I look for in wrestling, you know, someone to end up in cake.
Yeah. Vince reactions
Good
to people
comedy.
dancing with something else. And I love Lou sticking up. Yeah, he does kind of stick up for Freddie there a little bit. So managers sticking. And then, of course, as we talked about offline, you know, they actually go to commercial break, and then Jesse and Vince are talking. Ventura says that Orton annihilating Orndorff was his highlight, and Hulk Hogan broke every rule in the match. So
I cannot disagree.
I cannot disagree either. And then we'll be right back with more after this, and they come back and they just say goodbye. So we get
stick around for another commercial break and then come back.
Two commercial breaks for like 2 minutes of conversation, then 1 minute. This is what Saturday night's main event was back then. All right. Any other thoughts on the show before we move to the next episode?
I don't think so. I think we've covered the.
All right. We'll move through this
Saturday
a
night's
little
main
quicker.
travesty.
We basically set the stage. What's that?
Saturday night's main travesty, as Dave referred to it.
Saturday night's main.
Yeah, the Observer. He called the Saturday night's main travesty.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, did he have any ratings? You're a
he did not. No,
he didn't. Okay.
He was just disgusted by it.
Oh, Dave. I guess it just depends on who he's talking to in WWF or WWE over the years, right? Is that how it works with Dave?
Yeah, I'm not certain at that point it worked that way. I think it was more a matter of it didn't align with his taste.
Yeah.
Or very, very many people's taste at that point.
I get the sense he's not the biggest WWF, WWE fan over the years.
Certainly not then. Yeah. He was more of an NWA guy, I would say.
Yeah.
He was a big Ric Flair. You know, I think Ric Flair was his favorite at that point. So,
yeah. All right. So the next episode is in October. So we're 5 months after the first. Excuse me. It's taped on October the 3rd and aired 2 days later. This is in the Brendan Byrne Arena in East Rutherford, New Jersey. It eventually becomes the Continental Airlines Arena and then the Izod Center. I was actually there once. If anybody remembers Monday Night SmackDown, when all of the Raw people were stuck in Europe as a result of a volcano and the airspace was closed in 2010.
Wow.
Yep. Your main event was Undertaker versus Jack Swagger, baby. Woohoo!
Ooh, what a main event.
What a main event. They had all the SmackDown
two shooters.
People. But I will say, in a dark segment, Undertaker and Triple H squared off, and we knew right then and there that they would be working Mania. Because that's usually that's usually how they set up Manias via the dark segments. Anyway, it was home to the New Jersey Nets of the NBA, the New Jersey Devils, and the Seton Hall Pirates of the NCAA. The arena opened in 1981 and closed in 2015. It is still used as a rehearsal stage by concert performers and NBC Universal for television filming. So that's a little history on the Izod Center, what was the Brendan Byrne Arena. A lot of interviews before the first match takes place. Volkov and Blassie, or Nikolai Volkov and Freddie Blassie, are interviewed by Gene Okerlund. Nikolai says he wants to take the WWF Championship back to Russia, and he will not hesitate to push a missile button. We are in the midst of the Cold War at this point, so
this was a very patriotic episode.
Very patriotic episode for sure. And Blassie says that Volkov always means what he says. Hogan responds, Volkov is no threat to him or America. Waving the Russian flag gets him red hot, and the only flag that will wave is the red, white, and blue. And then, which seems like the first of like 20 interviews, Hillbilly Jim and Uncle Elmer are interviewed in the reception area. It's the first wedding since Tiny Tim and Miss Vicky, Victoria Budinger, back in 1969 on the Johnny Carson show. Hillbilly says that Elmer has a big night. First he's going to wrestle, then get married. Elmer says he's a man on a mission, not Mobile or Mabel or Mo there. And Piper comes in, questions if she's really going to marry. Roddy Piper comes in, questions if Joyce is really going to marry Elmer, and says he saw a pig run through here. So Piper setting the stage for his interference. And then we get a lot of talking. Vince and Jesse introduced the show. They hyped the tag title match, Orton versus Orndorff. The tag team match with Andre the Giant and Tony Atlas against Big John Studd and King Kong Bundy. Hogan's facing Volkov. Jesse starts in, goes on record and says he loves wrestling, but the wedding has no business on the show. Whew, a lot of talking. A lot of talking. Any thoughts on any of those interviews? You know, again, this was really the main part of Saturday night's main event. It was the interviews, it was the segments, it was the setup for what you were going to see in the ring.
This was, I became a wrestling fan in September of 85. And this is October 85. I mean, I remember watching my first episode of Saturday Night's Main Event, which was the second episode. So this was because I became obsessed with wrestling very, very quickly, like immediately, as soon as I started watching it. And what I can also remember just going into this show, because I was a precocious kid, so I actually figured out wrestling formulas pretty quickly. But at that point, I didn't know the formulas at all. So this, to me, was like, okay, the first Hogan title match I was ever going to see. You know, it's Hogan Volkov, and I was like, is Volkov going to win? You know, like,
yeah.
A few months later, I'd have known there's no way Nikolai Volkov is going to become world champion. Like, I figured that out. Like, by the time WrestleMania 2 came around, I knew King Kong Bundy was not going to be champion.
Right.
I didn't understand it. Like, I analyzed it, but I just knew in my head, okay, they're not going to make him champion. So, but going into this show, I was like, is Nikolai Volkov going to win? And then also the thing that really solidified my fandom, one of the things was when Bundy and Studd, Bundy was splashing Andre, which they show you a footage of in this episode. But that was one of the things I watched in the early weeks when I was becoming a fan. And so then they had this match with Atlas against, and I was like, is Andre going to get his revenge here? I had no idea that like these things were not going to happen at all, because that's not what the purpose of this show was. But I was going into this show just super excited about all these things, because at that point I had just been a fan for maybe a month. And here we were getting, competitive matches. And I had, could Hulk Hogan lose to Nikolai Volkov? I didn't know what could happen. Well, Andre got splashed by Bundy, and I felt really bad for him, and I wanted to see him get revenge. I was like, is Andre going to get his revenge here tonight on Saturday Night's Main Event? And so that's just a more personal version of just watching it in 1985, in October 1985, when I'm 12 years old. And the interviews they would do at the beginning, like when you're a kid, get you excited. Like, I got super excited for these matches, watching these promos at the start of the show. And no matter how silly they were, I bought in. So it's a little different now, but I watch it now, still remembering how I felt then. So this is really a very it's a fun rewatch, just because, and especially when like recognize, because I can actually really recognize that. Yeah, I became a fan in September '85, so this is literally like I've been a fan for like 4 weeks. But like I became like with all my things, I become obsessed. I was like, okay, that's it. I got to watch all wrestling that's ever on.
Yeah, I became a fan April of '86. Yeah, so this precedes my fandom. But
did you become a fan before WrestleMania 2, or like
before
right after
WrestleMania?
2?
Yep.
Before WrestleMania?
Yep. It was Hulk Hogan's Rockin' Wrestling that got me into it.
Yeah, it was the cartoon. I watched that cartoon every week.
Saturday morning cartoons, baby. We're the pajama generation. Cereal and pajamas, and Saturday morning cartoons.
Hulk Hogan Rockin' Wrestling. What a terrible cartoon! It was, and I was actually rewatching it when they added it to the network. But then, I don't know, right at the time they re-added it, a few weeks after is when that Hogan scandal broke, and then they took it down.
They took it down.
They took it that time.
But with getting back to the interviews, I mean, these are not great interviews by any stretch of the imagination, but it set the tone for what was coming on the show. It made, to me, it made that Volkov match, even though you knew there was no chance that Nikolai was going to win the title. It still made,
I didn't know that. I didn't know that. I thought he might. I thought he might. It was just the first Hogan title defense I was ever seeing. I'm certain of that.
Yeah.
I can remember not being certain that Hogan would win this match.
Yeah, and I should, to be fair, and I know I should have acknowledged that you said that, for people that were watching for a while.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you know what I mean? And for people that were watching,
if you were watching for more than a few months, you would have known.
Right, that there's no chance. But but you know what? But to your point, the way the interview was done, it made you think, oh crap, could Volkov win the title?
Take the title back to Russia?
I think that's 100% fair. And I mean, look, the hillbilly, the Uncle Elmer stuff is comedy, but it's funny that I do remember Saturday night's main event being a forum for the Uncle Elmer winning. So whether it was stupid comedy or not, something you didn't enjoy, it's still something that you remember.
That was the biggest thing. I mean, I can remember to this day. And actually, I mean, the Uncle Elmer wedding is probably what made me a huge Roddy Piper fan.
Yeah.
Without recognizing that, I'm becoming a fan of this heel, bad guy to me. But and I'm not recognizing that. I'm so entertained by him. I actually like him. Although I did recognize it because the Jewish holiday of Purim, which you may have heard of, sort of like Halloween, where you dress up in costumes. So it was in '86. I was Roddy Piper for Halloween.
Oh, look at that!
It was the first. I mean, I wasn't even a fan for a year at that point, but he was a heel. It was so funny because I was talking with my sister one time about this, and I was able to nail down the year, like when I dressed like this, because I told her, I was like, no, Andrea, it couldn't have been '87 because I was Piper when he was a heel. They had to be '86 because he was already a babyface at '87.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a digression. Sorry.
No, not at all. Not at all. In fact, he's babyface by the end of '86. Comes back against the Iron Sheik.
Yep.
So, all right. Let's see here. We get Vince and Jesse. They introduced the show. We talked about that. Volkov sings the anthem, and then Hogan again.
Are you going to sing it? Are you going to sing it for us?
Okay. Gets me every time.
It's so amazing.
You got to do the salute too.
He's so perfect. He's so perfect at it.
Oh man. Hogan interviewed this time by Gene, says he can't stand to see our enemy's flag in the ring, and when it's over, we'll see the stars and stripes. So, a lot of patriotism there. And we go to the match. So this goes about 5.5 minutes. This time it's Hogan winning after the leg drop. Volkov is aggressive early in the match, doesn't let Hogan do his shirt rip routine. And by the way, we should point out Hogan was not in the yellow and red. He was in white, as he would occasionally do back in this time period. He was in his white trunks.
Still establishing the final Hulk Hogan persona.
Yeah. I think he did it too, like in a house show match against Greg Valentine. I remember like on one of those tapes.
I have that image in my head too.
Yeah.
He'd have a headband on maybe.
Hogan takes it to the outside. Jesse laments him. Jesse's always lamenting him on commentary. He does it here as Hogan is working on the outside. Hogan reverses a pile driver to a back body drop. And then I mentioned earlier, he hulks up after a near fall off of a body slam, does his routine, and pins Volkov. I thought, for what it was, it's not a great match, but it's not bad. I thought they got where they needed to be.
I beg to differ on that. Not bad.
Okay.
I did not like this match.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, was it the worst Hogan match ever? Probably not. It was only 5 minutes. It was comparing it to the Orton match. The Orton match was decent. This is
right.
Now
if you're comparing it to the Orton match, I totally agree with you. This is not a match, and let me just be clear. This is not, oh my God, you got to go back and watch this. I mean, it's 5.5 minutes. I mean, Volkov isn't exactly.
I mean, it might be 6 stars in Tokyo, but
yeah. or is this a main event anywhere in the country, David?
It's a main event in any arena in the country.
Any arena in the world.
In the world.
No, my point is it didn't overstay its welcome. I mean, it's not a great match. I mean, Volkov was not a
none of these matches overstay their welcome.
Right.
I mean, they're all short matches.
And that's the point. I mean, putting it in 1985 context, going back to, the overall theme, you're not getting these matches on TV. So, in today's world, people are probably crapping on this match, or this match isn't even taking place. You know what I mean? So it's in
the context, this is not, it was a bad match, but it wasn't. I enjoyed watching it, and it delivered what people wanted. People weren't going to Hogan matches to see a good match.
No,
they were expecting that. You knew what you were getting.
No, and you're not going to get.
I was a Hulkamaniac at that point.
Yeah, and you're not going to get that with Nikolai Volkov. So
no.
And then babyface Hogan spits on the Russian flag and he shines his shoes with it. So. Then he gets interviewed again. A lot of interviews. People get interviewed a lot on this show. He'll be happy to explain a little slower next time what the USA means to Volkov. And then Gene asks him about the wedding, says it's nice to mellow out a little bit, says that wrestlers can be nice people too. And he can't wait to see Gene play a little keyboard at Uncle Elmer's wedding. So, and then Hillbilly Jim, Cousin Junior, and Uncle Elmer get interviewed. Second time Hillbilly and Elmer getting interviewed on this show. They don't say much. Gene asks Uncle Elmer if he's worried about the wedding or the romance. He says he's not worried at all. And then Hillbilly says a really weird line. What's the best wrestler in the World Wrestling Federation got to worry about? Who the hell was he talking about?
Uncle Elmer.
What Uncle Elmer?
Uncle Elmer, Stan Frazier.
Jesus Christ. Oh, man.
Did we note that this is a legitimate wedding?
It is a legitimate wedding. Yeah, I was going to get to that. When we get to it is a legitimate wedding. They do actually get married on this show. But first, we have to do a real 5-star classic here with Uncle Elmer against the gentleman Jerry Valiant. So according to ProFightDB.com, this is actually his last match until he wrestles at the Great American Bash against the Cuban Assassin as Mr. X.
Wow.
Yeah. He goes by many names throughout his career. He works mostly in Canada. He's once managed by Bobby the Brain Heenan. He goes by Guy Heenan at one point and was Bobby's storyline brother. He later holds the WWF or WWF tag titles with his storyline brother, Luscious Johnny Valiant. This is great. The less talent brother. There you go. Dixon.
And Johnny Valiant's on the show
How
too.
you doing, Dixon?
Yeah.
Uncle Elmer, he goes back to the 60s. I thought at one point it was interesting to see that he actually wrestled with Ted DiBiase, and they swapped the tag team titles with the Freebirds. How about that?
Interesting.
Yeah. Yep.
What a interesting fact there.
This match, folks. This match. How many seconds, David?
It was a new record. It was 6 seconds is the claim.
6 seconds. And
6 seconds, a new record.
And tell the folks at home, what move did Uncle Elmer use to beat Jerry Valiant?
I don't even remember.
A body slam.
Was it a body slam?
A freaking body. Like, not even a power slam, not even like a body slam. Could you imagine that?
I saw it and I forgot. My imagination fails me at this point.
Yep.
Yeah,
and then they show that this beat the record of King Kong Bundy beating SD Jones at WrestleMania in 9 seconds. Uncle Elmer, Cousin Luke, and Hillbilly get interviewed again. And Elmer says he never should have took that daggone coat off if he was planning on staying. So, yeah, great interview. They show Arnold Schwarzenegger in the crowd. So Schwarzenegger making his WWF en route to his Hall of Fame career, making his appearance early. Johnny and Jimmy show more energy. You know, do you have any experience going back and watching the Valiant Brothers? I think I might have. Like, I think they had like the tag team title history or something like that. Have you ever gone back and watched any of their work? Johnny and Jimmy?
If I did, it was when I was a kid.
Yeah, me too.
Watching those Coliseum videos that you just referred to. Like, yeah, they show you a tag team title history, and then you might get a match with those guys, but not really. Nothing that I remember.
Yeah. All right, we'll move this along here. You then have the Body Shop. I forgot about the Body Shop with Jesse Ventura. He's got Bobby the Brain Heenan. Ventura calls him the manager of the year. Basically, what they discuss is Paul Orndorff's first firing of Bobby Heenan as manager. Heenan says that, he only found out that in 30 seconds I was going to fire him. So good old Bobby. And I had forgotten about the bounty. The bounty was $25,000. He said it was too hard to get people to work for $25,000. He should have called me if he was having any problems. And then he upped it to $50,000. And then Heenan goes off and says that he should leave his boots in the ring and retire. Any thoughts on the Body Shop, David?
You know, I don't really have that many thoughts on the Body Shop. It was probably sort of a takeoff on Piper's Pit, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, Jesse's talents were more in the commentating realm. I never really got into the Body Shop. I think we might have even discussed the bounty in the past, because I've always been intrigued by this bounty Heenan placed on Paul Orndorff, specifically because, and he didn't say it here, but there were times when Bobby Heenan said it was not only a bounty that wrestlers could collect, but anyone could collect this if they take out Paul Orndorff.
I think we talked about that when we talked about the Classic.
I found a very, very, if you're looking for some liability, if some crazy fan had attacked Paul Orndorff, done anything to him, WWF would have been liable, certainly.
Yeah.
You cannot. I mean, that's beyond negligence. It's actually kind of reckless, but I mean, it was a different time. It would never have happened. There's no. I think we even. There's no way that you'd have Solo Sikoa come out there and be like, "Listen, fans, $50,000 for anyone who could take out." Roman Reigns.
Yeah.
And you're never going to do that because there's a crazy person that will do it, and there's going to be legal liability attached to it.
There's a crazy person that's going to do it, and everybody's got a phone and access to YouTube. So,
the bounty has always intrigued me. Again, specifically, and it's not. He doesn't say it here, but I can't refer to the exact episodes where he does. Heenan says that this bounty is not limited to professional wrestlers, but it's for anyone. Which is that's where you really, it's like, whoa, you're gonna tell the public that they can collect $50,000 if they take this guy out.
Yeah.
All right.
We then get a couple of interviews in the back, more interviews. Gene interviews Paul Orndorff, says that any man wearing a dress ain't man enough to collect the bounty. And
yeah, it's another line that you wouldn't hear today.
No, sir.
No,
And then
no,
he's
no.
probably
A
spending his
lot of lines on the show you're not going to hear today.
No, sir. Probably spending his money on more dresses.
Yeah,
And then
another one.
As Orndorff comes out, talk about lines that wouldn't be said today. Vince says a Piper better worry about getting paid because the bounty may be a check written out of Hong Kong.
Yeah. There's
1985, folks. That's what we're talking about.
1980s.
Vince or Gene then interviews Roddy Piper, says if Heenan doesn't pay him, he'll rip Heenan's throat out. Says that Orton puts baby oil all over himself and he came out to get rid of him. He says he'll collect money from Heenan's grandmother if he doesn't pay him. The lines. Anyway, we get to a match between Paul Orndorff and Roddy Piper. So we've basically covered the background of this match. This goes a little over 4 minutes. It's a brawl. I mean, there's maybe like two wrestling moves in the match, maybe one. The suplex by Paul Orndorff on Roddy Piper. And Jesse goes, that's the first wrestling move we've seen. So any thoughts on Orndorff versus Piper? That basically was just a brawl.
I liked it. I thought it was a really good brawl.
Yeah,
I liked it a lot, actually. I thought it was kind of weird. I don't think you heard any bell or anything. And then they come back from the break, and Vince says they've both been disqualified. And it looked to me like it should have been a double count out.
He did say double disqualification, and it looked like a double count out to me. And this is a good time. Well, you know what? We'll bring it up in the next match because there's another DQ. There's another DQ coming up. But I like it too. I mean, it fits. This was not a match where you were going to get a pinfall. This was just a fight, and this was a feud that was, that was not going to end. So
it was a feud I was into early on. I mean, this was, Piper and Orndorff I was like, I want to see these guys fight.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So then we go to the wedding, and really, it is a legitimate wedding. On one side, you've got Captain Lou, you've got Andre the Giant, Hillbilly Jim. On the other side, there was Hulk Hogan. Was the other dude Oliver Humperdinck? He looked exactly like, right?
I don't know. It definitely was not Oliver Humperdinck. He was not.
But the dude looked just like him.
Really? I'd have to go look back.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out who the other guy is.
Was it Cousin Luke?
Oh, it might have been Cousin Luke. Yeah, you're right. It might have been Cousin Luke. Yeah. I didn't even think about that. So the wedding does go off, but I noticed some of these comments. These are great. Jesse, Joyce ought to be nervous about spending the rest of her life with this guy. Imagine waking up to him after a hard day's work. Vince thinks she's having second thoughts. Jesse goes, boy, I wish they wouldn't share this with me. Then he goes, the judge should sentence both of them to jail. They're both cracking up during the vows. And then Uncle Elmer blows the line. He goes, hell, I'll expect and love you.
Yeah, I know. He was so nervous. And did you see Joyce got hit with something? Someone threw something and it hit her.
Yes. It was right after that line, too. Then Jesse goes, are the rings going on fingers or noses?
It's horrible.
Oh, my God.
And then Piper comes out and I think saves the day by it.
He does. And then during the ring exchange, Elmer can't hear the judge, and he boffs one of the lines. Jesse's dying. This is just, you know what, honestly, the best way I could sum this up, this was so bad it was good.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was, unfortunately cringe entertainment there.
Yeah.
I felt bad for Stan Frazier. I really did.
Yeah.
At that point. He seemed very, very nervous. And I felt bad for George. She got hit with that thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, I don't know if a wrestling event where Uncle Elmer's wedding should have taken. But it was a memorable Saturday Night's Main Event. Like to
It
this
was
day,
for sure. And then
I definitely remember Uncle Elmer's wedding.
you mentioned the Piper. Roddy Piper comes out, says there's no
Oh.
room for wrestling and romance. No room for a pig farmer to be marrying anyone during a wrestling match. You stink, and the whole damn wedding stinks.
I'm pretty sure that's what made me a huge Piper fan without understanding that I was becoming a fan.
Yeah.
I was like, because it's still like you're a kid and you're not really. I'm like, okay, I'm not supposed to like this guy, but oh my god, he's entertaining.
Yeah.
Because I would still root for Hulk Hogan, but I definitely liked Piper more than Hogan. Piper was, I didn't dress as Hulk Hogan and come the holiday. I was Roddy Piper.
You were Roddy Piper.
Roddy Piper, yeah. He captured my imagination. And then really, Randy Savage did it even more. Randy Savage was my favorite. Randy Savage, once he came in and once he took off.
Yeah. Jesse then says they should throw the judge out and let Roddy marry them. Then they go to the reception area. Jesse says that all the friends of the family there when he sees a bunch of pigs running around.
I laughed at that laugh.
Yeah. All right, we'll motor through we're coming up on a couple of hours here, David. So we'll motor through the rest of this. Mean Gene interviews Big John Studd, King Kong Bundy, Bobby Heenan. Studd says that he and Bundy are the true giants in wrestling, and Andre is number 3. That was always a thing for Big John Studd. Studd calls him Andrea. I don't know if you caught that.
I did. Oh, yeah.
And remember, I cut your hair. And I believe that was with Ken Patera.
That was with Ken Patera. That was it. That was the famous Vince line, raping Andre's dignity.
Yeah. So then it's Andre the Giant and Mr. USA, Tony Atlas, against King Kong Bundy and Big John Studd. This goes about 4.5 minutes. It's another DQ. So it gets to a point where Studd and Bundy are double teaming Andre. The referee is trying to I think Studd's the legal man at this point. Bundy is not. And then he calls for the bell. So one of the rare times you see double teaming and the referee calling for the bell. Wouldn't happen in AEW these days, I'll tell you that much. You get, pretty much Andre does his thing. He dominates early, does his splash in the corner. Atlas and Studd go at it. Get a bunch of headbutts by Atlas. And then Andre and Studd are going at it in the ring. Bundy and Atlas on the or then Andre and Bundy actually, then Studd and Atlas go on the outside. So, again, not much of a match, but this really does, all this does is set up Hogan coming out, making the save. And as we would find out later on, Hogan and Andre would be slated to take on Studd and Bundy at the next Saturday Night's Main Event. Any thoughts on this match, David?
Just to bring it back to that contemporary time period again, it's such a bad match looking at it now, right?
Yeah.
And Andre's so bad, but really, I mean, in addition to Piper and Hogan, when I think about what drew me in at that time was that larger than life aspect of both Andre and Studd and even Bundy. I mean, they were a sight to see, and that had so much to do with the overall product, what I was watching. Not just, is this match going to be exciting? Because their matches weren't exciting, but
no,
they were so larger than life. Look at these guys, and so that excited me. And I could remember being excited about, Hogan and Andre are going to team against Bundy and Studd. And then I thought, okay, that's where Andre will get his revenge, because it's Hogan and Andre. This is going to be the best tag team of all time. How can anyone deal with these two? Right. So it just brings me back to like those early days of being a fan, and how I analyze it now, and I'm like, is this match? This match sucked, but like, so what? In a lot of ways, like, matches can suck, and just as a 5-star match is not what's going to bring AEW success. Like, just because a match sucks doesn't mean that it's, it doesn't mean that it's bad for business, as
Right.
like Wade's term, bad for business, good for business. Like, absolutely, in 1985, 86, Andre the Giant was good for business. And I think Andre the Giant versus John Studd was probably pretty good for business. I mean, when I was a kid, it interested me. I mean, those guys going at it, that interested me. And John Studd was the nothing, like, as a wrestler, and even, he didn't really have charisma or anything, but he was a big guy and believable as a foe of Andre's, and especially when they're putting him over, and when Bundy's standing there and delivering splashes to Andre. I'm like, oh, these seemed like real challenges to Andre.
Yeah.
Even though the matches, you'd watch the match and be boring as hell, it didn't matter. So it's just a different perspective you have on wrestling. And like some people, I'm sure, like when your kids are watching wrestling, they're watching it way differently from how you watch it. If you're watching it with your kids and what they value and what they enjoy.
I mean, I remember a year later, I think they had a television match, Studd and Bundy against the British Bulldogs. And I'm thinking, my God, how are the Bulldogs going to contend with these guys?
I remember. I thought the same thing.
And then Hogan and Orndorff, in the famous match where Orndorff turns, like how, my God, these guys are against Hogan. You know what I mean? Like these guys are against Studd and Bundy. How are they going to fare? And it was kind of scary.
That Bundy and Studd team, they were a team that you heard Studd and Bundy. It wasn't like, oh God, this match is going to suck. It was like, I want to see what's going to happen, is how I felt then.
Yeah.
And looking at it now, it's like, I don't want to Bundy and Studd. I know I'm not going to enjoy whatever I'm watching now, but back then, in King Kong Bundy, what Gorilla call him, a condominium with legs?
The walking condominium.
They just had a look,
The walking condominium.
And a presentation,
Yep. Just like the one-man gang was the Human 747.
Oh. Until he became Akeem.
So this is a good point to ask this. Are there too many matches at this point? You got a DQ here. You get a double count out in the previous match. You get basically a squash before this. You go to the first Saturday night's main event. Let's see here. We just did pinfall. That's a DQ. You got a DQ in a bit. Are there too many, DQ count out finishes at this point? Or, is it effective in telling the stories that they're telling, based on what they want to do moving forward?
I think it's probably more the latter at this point. And maybe it's because we're still, again, so used to seeing squash matches.
Yeah.
So we don't have the expectation that on television we're going to be getting these finishes. It hadn't been established that that's what we should expect.
Yeah.
So I don't remember, and again, I was a different viewer and it was very early on, but I don't remember being like, oh wow, none of these matches gave me finishes.
Yeah. And it's funny, and Todd actually did bring this up. This was something that DQs and countouts and things like that worked a little bit more here in this time period because you weren't getting those matches all the time. Back to the original point of Saturday night's main event.
So just getting the competitive match itself.
You're just getting the competitive. Exactly. You're getting the competitive.
You didn't have to give us the payoff with the finish.
I never sat there like, oh my God, they should have given us why are we getting a DQ? Why are we getting a count out? Like, if we got that at Forbidden Door with Will Ospreay and Swerve Strickland, I'd have been pissed because, or
even like back then at WrestleMania. WrestleMania, you don't get the payoff. Well, there's just the expectations. I think were different,
right?
And what we were watching was different. Like to Todd's point, when all you're used to seeing is a bunch of squash matches. Oh, getting competitive matches even without a finish is not going to really bother you.
Right. And by the way, for those that are not VIP members, I'm of course referring to Todd Martin, co-host of The Fix, and he also does the post pay-per-view roundtables. Those of you watching on YouTube that aren't VIP members, if you go VIP here at the Torch, you're able to hear those great shows. That's pwtorch.com/go VIP. All right. Getting ready to round third here and head home. So that's the match. Real quick, Gene Okerlund finds George the Animal Steele at a zoo in Detroit. He calls a camel chic. He makes an elephant sound at an elephant, says that a tiger is from Detroit. There's a weasel, says Heenan, and a hippo is Bundy. So
and like I said, this George Steele did not even work for me back then. And,
yeah.
I was probably the intended audience at 12 years old, right? Maybe a little younger. Maybe there was more for like 8-year-olds.
Yeah.
I don't know. But George Steele never really did it for me.
They cut to Mean Gene then talking to Greg the Hammer Valentine, Brutus Beefcake with Johnny Valiant. Valentine's the only one that talks, says we'll take on anyone, including you, Gene. And they cut to when Valentine and Beefcake beat Barry Windham and Mike Rotunda for the tag titles via a foreign object. And then the last match, not much of a match, David. It's said Dream Team, Valentine and Beefcake, taking on the formidable tandem of Leaping Lanny Poffo and Tony Garea.
Tony Garea was a huge 1970s star.
Yes. Multiple-time tag team champion, too.
Yes, he was a perennial tag team champion.
Yeah.
And wasn't there the story how he was considered for the world championship that I don't really actually believe?
I'm not I'm not familiar with that, but I believe it.
Well,
I know Tito Santana was considered at one point.
At what point? Really?
Apparently when Brett.
Oh, okay. All right.
Apparently when Brett won the title, there was consideration for Tito.
Yeah. There was desperation at that. Yeah, I can see that.
El Matador. Anyway, 3.5 minutes. And basically Tony Garea taps to the Greg Valentine figure 4 leg lock. Anything on this match?
Did he tap out?
Or he submitted. He submitted. You're right.
I mean, it was it was a squash match, really.
Yeah. And that's the thing. And this is a good time to point this out. Usually I consider Saturday night's main event kind of had the upside down wedding cake mentality where you get the main event first, or at least the top matches first. And then as the show went on, the matches got lesser and lesser important, I would say.
Probably because of the time.
Exactly.
The time slot. I mean,
it's exactly what it was. Exactly what it was.
You're going to get the biggest audience at the beginning.
Right.
11:30, yeah.
It'll be much different this week when it returns, I would imagine.
Oh, yeah. 8
really
o'clock, prime time, 2-hour show.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty excited for this one, actually.
I am too. All right, so then we get the wedding reception. Just a couple of nuggets from this. Hulk Hogan says that this might propel Uncle Elmer to the top of the WWF. Okay. Jesse says he dressed down for the occasion. This is his Keith Richards look. Albano, Captain Lou, says he's trying to teach, I think it was Uncle Elmer, how to eat with your left hand to keep your right hand free to greet your friends. Okay. Leaping Lanny Poffo reads a poem with no shirt on to Elmer and Joyce. There's a little plug for NBC in there. Hillbilly Jim gives a toast, says he's open to dinner every Sunday night, so inviting himself over. And then we get Tiny Tim from that wedding in 1969. Gives a ukulele to Uncle Elmer and his wife, references his song, Tiptoe Through the Tulips. And then the big angle, Jesse Ventura reads a poem, says, I've heard your dance, I've heard your song, but I must say this is wrong. And basically shame on anybody mixing wrestling and romance. And for his efforts, he gets shoved into the cake. So 2 straight Saturday nights main events.
Is there a cake in the third episode? I don't even remember.
I don't remember.
There seems to be a pattern developing.
Any comments on the wedding reception, David?
Not really. I do feel like, this was a legitimate wedding. It was Uncle Elmer's wedding day. So yeah. I'm glad that they were making statements like perhaps this will propel Uncle Elmer straight to the top of the World Wrestling Federation. He deserved it on his day, especially considering the wedding itself had its issues.
Yeah.
He had his issues. And, it was another cake, another wrestler. And of course, if you have a cake on a wrestling program, someone ends up in it. That's just a rule. But, 2 straight episodes might be a bit of an overkill.
Yeah.
But I don't remember if there was a cake in the third one.
I don't remember.
I think not, but I mean, I didn't remember. If you would have asked me, were there cakes in the first 2 episodes, I probably would not have remembered there was. I would have remembered the Uncle Elmer one, but I don't think I would have remembered Moolah.
Yeah. They go to break. They come back. Vince says that Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant will face Big John Studd and King Kong Bundy. Talks to Hogan about it a bit.
I was excited for that match. I can remember. I was really excited for that.
No, listen, and they hyped it up, which is the right thing to do. Yeah. The right thing to do. And then after about 2 minutes, we'll be back for more. And then they come back from break. And
they come back and like, we're done. We're done. We got you stick around, though.
I think I even remember Raw having that formula early on where they would have the last match and said, come back, we'll have more action when we return. And then they come back.
Frank, the crazy thing is I'm pretty sure I never actually, even though I knew it was done, I never shut it off until it was actually, I think I stuck around until they came back.
That's right.
Like I knew it was done, whenever it was like 5 minutes, 12:55 or whatever, I knew there was nothing else going on and I would stick around like, okay.
So you didn't dare go away, right, David?
I didn't dare go away.
You didn't dare go away.
I don't want to miss. Something might happen.
All right. Well, folks, that is your review of the first 2 Saturday night's main event shows. I appreciate everybody that was in the chat. Azan, Justin, Kevin, Nick, CJ, Jake. Make sure I get everybody here.
Are we going to sing Obsession for them?
What's that?
Are we going to sing Obsession?
I know. We totally should. We totally should.
Everyone leaves the chat. Everyone's like, I'm out of here.
You are an obsession.
These 2 guys duetting Obsession. That's it. We're done.
I am possessed. Real quick, David, before we wrap it up, I give these shows a thumbs up. You know why? They were easy watches. You got a lot out of it. Was it great quality wrestling, great quality television? No. But at that point in my life when I was watching, I didn't care. It served its purpose, based on, like I said, based on what we were getting on television at the time. I thought it served its purpose, and I go back and watch it again.
It's better than AEW now.
You know what? No, you joke. I would rather go back. I'd rather go back and watch a Saturday night's main event than any episode of Dynamite. Then that's not to say that an episode of Dynamite doesn't have better quality wrestling than Saturday night's main event. Duh. Of course it does. Listen. But the way Saturday night's main event hit you back then, Saturday night's main event made me a wrestling fan. I'll go and make that statement right now.
I'll also make the statement. I'd rather watch Andre the Giant and John Studd than Wheeler Yuta. I'm sorry.
No,
I don't care if Wheeler Yuta can go, and he can. The guy, and this is a Jim Cornette line. What do you call it? An ironing board with tights.
Ironing board with tights.
That's what the dude is. Come on. And what are they trying to push him as? Or frankly, Daniel Garcia doesn't do anything for me either. Yeah. Although he's better than Yuta. But so. But I didn't want it. We don't have to bring this into.
Different strokes for different folks. But I just think that it was for its time, it was a special show. It really was, and
time and place. The time and place. I'm curious.
As much as I love it, I'm curious how it's going to work now. It's going to be impossible to recapture the charm that it had back then. But we'll see. If they don't put up like the Titantron or any of the special effects, it really could be.
Will that work for a modern audience? For us, it'll work. But
right.
And so much of their audience is our age or older. So
yeah,
who knows? Who
knows?
But I don't know what younger fans will make of this.
Yeah.
That also interests me because both of us were we're the same age, and we have a whole nostalgia aspect to this that also it's going to make our judgment. We look through a certain context, and it's going to be viewed differently from someone who was born in 2002 and is a wrestling fan now at 22 years old or whatever. I mean, Wade's co-host the other night on I think it was the last post show he hosted. He's like 25 or something. Yeah. I had no idea. He was like, I was like, oh my God, he's half my age. And that's he's got a totally different understanding and perspective on wrestling. Geez, he was born after the Attitude Era.
Yeah, if you're 25 years old, you're born during the on the downside of the Attitude Era, if you ask me, in 1999. So.
Oh yeah. I think.
Yeah. All right, David. Anything you want to plug before we sign off?
Not really. I mean, hey, if anyone's in DC and they want to do some jiu-jitsu, come look us up at the High Style Jiu-Jitsu Club. That's about it. I have my my activism on social media, but I'll keep that to myself. I don't need Wade getting any angry emails or whatever.
Gotcha.
Or Frank. Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, it's always a pleasure, David.
Absolutely. Pleasure was mine. Privilege. It's great speaking with you.
Done a lot of fun shows. We did the Wrestling Classic last year, Spring Stampede earlier this year.
94.
So yeah, go back. Unfortunately, you have to be a VIP member to check those out. So I'm sorry to anybody listening on YouTube that isn't a VIP member. But I do take this opportunity to encourage you to go VIP at the Torch. That's PW Torch.
I think the Wrestling Classic one was really good for people who remember the Wrestling Classic or are interested in it. I think they'd really enjoy that one, and the Spring Stampede one too. But there's getting to talk 1980s wrestling with guys who were kids at the time. It's just
it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
So that's pwtorch.com/govip. And I want to thank everybody again in the chat. And David, I thank you. We'll do this again soon, my friend.
Please, anytime. Love it.
For David Wolf, I am Torch contributor Frank Pettiani, reminding you that if you are looking for nostalgia, you've come to the right place, where we talk pro wrestling then and now.